The waitress who found her passed in a billionaire's mansion. A night to remember. Lily Adams adjusted the straps of her apron, taking a deep breath as she glanced at the towering Hawk mansion in front of her. It was everything she had imagined and more grand, sophisticated, and completely out of her league. She had worked at countless high-end events before, but none were as opulent as this. The mansion's towering white columns gleamed under the soft glow of the setting sun, and the manicured lawns stretched for what seemed like miles. Everything about this place screamed wealth, power, and privilege. A world Lily was used to seeing only from the outside. At 23, Lily had already spent years juggling multiple jobs to make ends meet. Raised by her adoptive parents in a modest neighborhood, she had learned early on that life wasn't easy. But she never gave up. She worked hard, kept her head down, and did her best to get by. Tonight's catering gig at the Hawk estate was supposed to be just another job, just another paycheck. But as she walked up the mansion's grand marble steps, Lily felt an odd sense of discomfort stirring in her chest, something she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't the first time she had been in such a setting, but there was something unsettling about the Hawk family and their lavish lifestyle. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was nothing short of dazzling. Crystal chandeliers dangled from the high ceilings, their lights reflecting off polished marble floors. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and the air was thick with a cocktail of perfume, laughter, and hushed conversations. The guests, mostly high-powered politicians, CEOs, and socialites, mingled effortlessly in their designer gowns and tailored suits. The sound of clinking glasses and the occasional burst of laughter filled the room as Lily walked through the crowd, offering trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres with chauffeurs. Lily kept her head down, sticking to the usual routine she knew so well: smile, serve, and leave. But her mind kept drifting back to the uncomfortable feeling she had when she first arrived. Something about this place felt wrong. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the nagging feeling stayed with her, growing stronger as the evening wore on. It wasn't until she ventured into the quieter part of the mansion that everything changed. Her eyes wandered as she walked down a narrow hallway away from the bustling ballroom. The area was dimly lit with dark wood paneling and long, silent portraits of men and women who seemed to stare down at her as she passed. They were all part of the Hawk family, no doubt, members of a lineage that had lived in this mansion for generations. But it was one portrait hanging at the end of the hall that caught her attention and stopped her in her tracks. A framed black and white photo, faded with age, hung on the wall in a thin frame. At first glance, it seemed like just another picture in the long corridor, but as Lily's eyes focused, her breath caught in her throat. The girl in the photograph looked no older than 5 years old, her brown hair curling around her face and her big, wide eyes staring directly at the camera. There was something hauntingly familiar about her smell, and for a split second, Lily's heart stopped. The face in the photo was unmistakable. It was her. The air seemed to leave the room as Lily stood frozen, her hands shaking as she gripped the tray in front of her. The shock of seeing her own face in a stranger's mansion sent a rush of confusion and disbelief through her. How could this be? She had never been to this mansion before. She didn't know anyone in the Hawk family. And yet, there she was, captured in a childhood photo hanging on their wall. As if she belonged there, Lily staggered backward, almost dropping her tray. Her mind raced. How could this be happening? Had someone from her past put the picture here? Her thoughts were a whirlwind of questions, but she couldn't bring herself to voice them. She turned quickly and hurried back down the hall, trying to collect herself. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and the laughter of the guests seemed distant, muffled by the pounding in her ears. The ballroom felt even more overwhelming as she returned. The smiles of the guests blurred into the background as her mind replayed the image of that photo again and again. She tried to shake it off, but it clung to her like a shadow. Who had put that photo there? Why was it in this mansion? And more importantly, what did it mean? Her hands were still trembling as she offered drinks to guests, trying to focus on her duties. But every part of her was consumed with the mystery of the photograph. Who had seen her as a child, and why had they placed the picture in the mansion? She had to find out. But she couldn't risk asking anyone directly. The rules were clear: no talking to guests, and certainly no snooping. But this felt like more than just a coincidence. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was something about this place and the people who lived in it that she needed to uncover. After a few more hours of serving, Lily slipped into the kitchen to take a break. The chaotic bustle of the ballroom had left her feeling lightheaded. As she leaned against the counter, trying to calm her nerves, she noticed Martha, the estate's longtime cook, moving about the kitchen with practiced precision. Lily hesitated, then decided to take the plunge. "You've worked here a long time, right?" Lily asked casually, trying to sound like she was just making conversation. Martha looked up, raising an eyebrow. Long enough to know more secrets than recipes, dear. Lily chuckled nervously, trying to steer the conversation in the direction she needed. What's the Hawke family like? Have they always lived here? Martha paused for a moment, then set down her knife, her eyes becoming slightly more distant. This estate's been in their bloodline for generations. Charles Hawke inherited it after his brother Andrew and his wife passed in an accident. Tragic story. Riley froze. Andrew, he died in an accident? Martha nodded, the sadness in her expression deepening. Car crash. Years ago, people say it was just bad luck, but who really knows? Lily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The details were starting to line up in her mind. The name, the accident, the eerie feeling she had walking through the mansion. Was it all connected? That night, back at her apartment, Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed the day's events, especially the image of that photo. Her adoptive parents had told her little about her past. All she knew was that she had been adopted at a young age. But why had the Hawke family's mention of all places held a photo of her as a child? And what did it all mean? Sleep didn't come easily, and as the hours stretched on, Lily knew she needed to find answers. She couldn't ignore the questions any longer. And she wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the truth about who she really was and what her connection to the Hawke family might be. Secrets beneath the surface. The following week, Lily returned to the Hawke mansion, her mind still buzzing with questions about the photograph and the startling connection she felt to the Hawke family. She had been trying to shake the feeling of unease, but it lingered like a shadow, refusing to let her rest. Every night as she lay in bed, the face of the little girl in the photograph haunted her, and she couldn't escape the nagging suspicion that her past, the part she had long forgotten or buried, was tied to this mansion in some way. This time, however, she was determined to get answers. She had told herself she would just focus on the task at hand, serving drinks, staying in the background, keeping her head down. But as she walked up the grand marble steps of the estate again, her heart began to race. The mansion seemed to loom even larger than before, a beautiful but foreboding symbol of the wealth and power that lay behind its doors. Tonight's gala was different. The guest list was even more exclusive than usual. It wasn't just business tycoons or socialites, but influential figures from across the country, some of whom Lily had only ever read about in the news. She had seen them on TV, attending award ceremonies and charity galas, and now they were in front of her, talking casually, as if they were just ordinary people. But they weren't. They were the epitome of the life Lily could only dream of. The contrast between the elite world she was serving and the world she came from had never felt more jarring. As Lily entered the mansion through the back, she was greeted by Frederick, the head butler, who gave her a stern, disinterested nod. He was always curt with her, making it clear that she was there to serve, not to socialize. Lily tried not to mind. She knew the drill. Do her job, keep quiet, and leave. But tonight the weight of her questions was unbearable. She went about her duties, offering drinks to the guests, trying her best to stay focused. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the room. Everything seemed normal, glamorous, yes, but normal. But then, just like before, her eyes were drawn to the hallway she had ventured down the last time. Her heart skipped a beat as she made her way toward it again. She hesitated for only a moment before slipping into the dim corridor. The sound of laughter and music from the ballroom faded as she walked farther down the hall. The portraits that lined the walls stared at her, silent and haunting. And then, just as she had feared, she saw it, a black frame against the wall, where the photograph had once hung. But this time, there was nothing there. The spot where the picture had been was now empty, a blank space in the wall that seemed to mock her. Lily's pulse quickened. The photo, the one that had looked so much like her as a child, was gone. She didn't know why it had been there in the first place, but she was sure of one thing: someone had deliberately removed it. She reached out and ran her fingers lightly along the empty space, as if she could somehow make sense of what had happened. Her heart pounded in her chest. What was going on here? Who knew about the photo, and why had it been taken down so quickly? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the distance. Lily quickly backed away from the wall and hurried back to the ballroom. As she re-entered the hustle and bustle of the gala, she tried to steady her breath, her mind racing. She had to know more. But how? She couldn't just keep asking questions without raising suspicion. She had to be careful. Later that evening, during a brief break in the kitchen, Lily found herself alone with Martha, the estate's longtime cook. Martha had always been kind to her, offering small words of comfort during the long shifts. Lily had decided that now was the time to dig deeper. If anyone knew the history of the Hawke family and the secrets hidden in this mansion, it would be Martha. She had been working here for years, through the highs and lows, and Lily hoped she could finally get some answers. "Martha," Lily said casually, "you've worked here a long time, right?" Martha gave her a slow, knowing look. "Long enough to have seen a few things," she said with a slight smile, continuing to chop vegetables. Lily leaned in a little, lowering her voice. "I've been curious about the Hawke family, about their history. I mean, they've lived in this mansion for generations, right?" Martha looked up at her, her expression unreadable. "Yes, child, they have. Charles Hawke inherited it from his brother Andrew. That's the story anyway." Lily's heart skipped. "What happened to Andrew?" she asked, trying to sound casual, though the question felt heavy in her mouth. Martha hesitated, her knife pausing midair. "He died in a car crash a few years ago." "Tragic. His wife, Helena, too. They were a prominent couple, well loved by the community. And they had children, right?" Lily asked, her pulse quickening. Martha's expression shifted, the calmness slipping for just a moment. She nodded slowly. "Yes, they had a little girl. She was only 5 when it happened." She looked at Lily, her gaze sharp. "Why do you ask?" Lily's throat tightened. "Did they have any family after the crash?" Martha's face clouded over. "Well, Charles took control of everything after the crash. He's kept a tight grip on the family legacy. The girl, well, the authorities said she died too, but no one ever saw the body. Some say she was taken somewhere." Lily's mind spun. Was she that little girl? Was it possible that she had been the one who had disappeared all those years ago? She had to know. "Why all the secrecy?" Lily pressed, her voice barely a whisper. Martha sighed deeply, her hands now resting on the countertop. "Because people around here don't ask questions. After Andrew and Helena died, Charles cleaned up everything, erased the past, made sure no one looked too closely." Lily felt her heart sink. If what Martha was saying was true, her entire life, everything she had known, could be a lie. The truth about her family, about who she really was, had been buried. But why? That night, Lily left the Hawke estate with more questions than answers. The haunting image of the photograph, the whispers of a lost child, and the strange secrets surrounding the Hawke family weighed heavily on her mind. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a woman who had uncovered a mystery that connected her to a billionaire family, and now, she had to find the truth no matter what it took. Uncovering the secrets. The next few days were filled with a strange mix of curiosity and anxiety for Lily. Every time she stepped foot inside the Hawke mansion, her heart raced. The weight of the photo she had seen, the one with her smiling face, lingered in her mind, as if it held the key to unlocking something crucial about her past. What if the connection was real? What if she truly belonged in this mansion, tied to the Hawke family in ways she couldn't yet comprehend? She had spent most of the following days trying to focus on her work, but every moment in the mansion felt charged with the possibility of a discovery. Each corner she turned, every hallway she walked through, felt like it held hidden answers she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Lily had returned to the mansion the day after her brief conversation with Martha. As soon as she stepped through the back door, the smell of freshly baked bread and roast meats filled the air, signaling that the night's event was just around the corner. The staff was busy preparing for the lavish gala, but Lily's mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the question she couldn't shake. Why was there a photo of me in this house? It was like a riddle she had to solve, a puzzle that was slowly starting to unravel. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the mansion and the family that inhabited it weren't just a world she had entered as a waitress. They were somehow a part of her story too. That evening, as she made her way to the kitchen to grab a tray of champagne glasses, she saw him again, Ethan Hawke. The man who had somehow become both a mystery and a source of unsettling attraction for her. He was standing by the grand staircase, engaged in a conversation with a few guests. When he caught her eye, there was a fleeting moment where the air between them seemed to shift. She quickly turned away, focusing on her duties. But the way he looked at her, as if he was also trying to figure out who she was, sent a shiver down her spine. Later that night, during a lull in the event, Lily slipped into the quiet hallway again, the one that had led her to the photos she'd seen days before. The mansion was alive with the sounds of laughter and music, but this hallway remained eerily silent. She moved toward the spot where the picture had been displayed, half expecting the photo to be back in its frame, or perhaps even more so, missing entirely. To her surprise, there it was again. The same black and white photograph of the young girl no older than 5, smiling at the camera with the same dimples Lily had seen in her own reflection all her life. The only difference was that it seemed to have been framed more carefully, the picture now pristine and polished with a label below it. In loving memory of Ray Hawk, the child who never left us. Lily froze. The name hit her like a bolt of lightning. Ray? Her heart began to pound. Could this really be true? Had her real name been Ray all along? Was this a twisted coincidence, or was this the key to everything she had been searching for? Her hands shook as she reached out to touch the frame, her fingers brushing against the glass, as if it would somehow make the truth more real. Before she could make sense of the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, startled, but it wasn't a staff member. It was Ethan. "Lily," he said, his voice low but steady. "I thought I might find you here." She felt her throat tighten as his presence seemed to fill the space. It was as if he knew something she didn't, but she wasn't ready to confront him yet, not with this photo staring at her, not with the truth she wasn't sure she could handle. "I didn't mean to disturb anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was looking for something." Ethan took a step closer, his expression unreadable, yet his gaze softened as it fell upon the picture. He didn't ask her directly about it, but his eyes lingered on the frame for a moment longer than necessary. "Ray Hawk," he said quietly, almost to himself. "That was my niece. She disappeared a long time ago. They said she died. But there's never been any proof." Lily's breath caught in her throat. Niece, was it possible? Could she be the child of Andrew Hawk, the late brother of Ethan? 1,000 questions raced through her mind, but she couldn't find the courage to voice them. "I didn't know," she began, her voice shaking. "I didn't know who I was. I only knew I was adopted." Ethan glanced at her, his expression now softer. He reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You deserve to know the truth, Lily. And I think you've just uncovered it. But it's not an easy truth, and it's going to take time to understand. Whatever you decide to do with it, I'm here." His words hung in the air, thick with meaning, and for the first time since stepping into the mansion, Lily felt a mix of fear and hope. Fear of what the truth might mean for her, but also a sense of liberation. The answers were finally within her grasp, but what would she do with them? As the night continued, Lily couldn't shake the weight of what she had learned. The discovery of the photo, the name Ray, and the connection to the Hawk family, it all pointed towards something bigger than herself. She wasn't just a waitress in a billionaire's mansion. She was a part of something far more significant than she had ever known. The next day, Lily returned to the mansion with a heavy heart. She had spent the entire night turning over every detail in her mind, piecing together fragments of her past, but she still had no clear idea what the future would hold. Would she confront Ethan? Would she confront the Hawks? What if this revelation changed everything about who she thought she was? There were still too many unanswered questions, and the truth was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. But one thing was certain, she was about to uncover a legacy that had been buried for years, a legacy that would reshape not only her life but the lives of the Hawk family as well. Unraveling the web of secrets. The following days at the Hawk mansion felt like a blur for Lily. She had not only discovered a shocking piece of her past, but now her entire sense of self was being questioned. The name Ray, the photograph, the sudden realization that she might belong to the very family she had spent her life unknowingly tied to, all of it swirled in her mind, clouding her every thought. But the mansion was not a place for contemplation. It was a stage for secrecy, opulence, and the hidden truths behind every smile and handshake. Lily's every encounter with Ethan seemed to add more fuel to the fire of confusion. Each time their eyes met, the unspoken tension between them grew thicker. She couldn't tell if he was being kind because he pitied her, or if there was something more, a curiosity, an interest, maybe even a genuine desire to understand what had been buried in the past. She couldn't tell. But one thing was clear, Ethan knew more than he was letting on, and Lily needed answers. The mansion's corridors were now filled with a sense of foreboding. Every room she passed felt as though it held secrets, each more valuable than the last. The grand chandeliers, the marble floors, and the luxurious furniture now seemed like the backdrop to a tangled web she was entangled in without ever having known it. One evening, after a long day of catering duties, Lily found herself alone in the estate's garden, the soft rustle of the leaves in the trees and the distant sound of the string quartet from the gala felt like a distant memory as she stared out at the sprawling estate. Her eyes wandered over the tall hedges and flower beds, but her mind was elsewhere, back to the hallway where the photo had been, and then to the conversation with Marcus, the longtime security guard. Marcus had seemed reluctant to speak, But when pressed, he had given her just enough to make her even more curious. He'd mentioned that Charles Hawke had taken over the estate rapidly after the tragic accident that had claimed the lives of his brother Andrew and his sister-in-law. No one in the mansion dared ask questions. And that's when Marcus mentioned the most shocking detail, the rumors that Andrew and his wife had a little girl who had disappeared shortly after their deaths. The chill in the air seemed to match Lily's growing unease. Could it be? Could she be that little girl? And if so, why had her life been erased from history? The answers seemed to be dangling just out of reach, like a carrot before a starving donkey. As Lily walked slowly through the garden, her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Ethan. He was walking toward her, his tall figure silhouetted against the soft glow of the garden lights. "I didn't expect to see you out here alone," he said with a small, guarded smile. Lily turned to face him, trying to steady her breath, still processing the conversations and discoveries of the last few days. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for. Answers, closure, or maybe just the comfort of knowing someone understood her confusion. But Ethan wasn't just anyone. He was the key to understanding everything that had been hidden from her for so long. "I needed a moment," Lily replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's too much to process." Ethan nodded, stepping closer. "I understand. It's not easy uncovering a past you didn't know existed. I won't pretend to know what you're feeling right now, but I do want to help. If you're ready to face the truth, I can help you. I can tell you everything." Lily's heart skipped a beat. His words were almost too calm, too composed. There was a part of her that wanted to hear the truth, to unravel the secrets of her past. But there was also a part of her that feared what she might uncover. Was she really prepared for the answers that could potentially destroy everything she thought she knew about herself? "I don't know if I can handle it," Lily confessed, her voice breaking just slightly. "What if the truth isn't what I want to hear?" Ethan reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "The truth doesn't always come wrapped in the way we expect it. But you deserve to know, and I believe you have the strength to face it." Lily swallowed hard. His hand on her shoulder felt warm, reassuring, but the uncertainty swirling inside her only grew stronger. Could she trust him? Could she trust that the Hawke family, the very family she had unknowingly been a part of, would offer the answers she sought? Or was it all a trap meant to keep her in the shadows, in a life that was never truly hers? "I don't even know where to start," Lily murmured, more to herself than to Ethan. "The beginning is usually a good place," Ethan said with a soft smile. "Your real name is Ray, Lily. You were Andrew Hawke's daughter. You've always been a part of this family." The weight of his words hit her like a freight train. Ray Hawke. Her entire life had been a lie, and now she was standing in the middle of a mansion that was supposed to be her home. But why had she been taken from the Hawkes? Why had she been erased from their history? "I don't remember any of it," Lily said, her voice trembling. "Why would they take me away? Why didn't anyone come looking for me?" Ethan's face darkened slightly and he looked away for a moment, as if lost in his own thoughts. "There are things that happen in families that aren't meant to be understood, but your father, he was trying to protect you, and when he died, Charles took over, and the rest was erased." Lily was still reeling from the shock. This was a story that sounded like something out of a movie, not her life. The idea that her own family, the very people she should have been with, had hidden her away was too much to process. It felt like a betrayal, a lie that had been passed down through generations. "I need to know everything," Lily said finally, her voice steadying with newfound determination. "I need to know what happened. I need to know who I am." Ethan nodded. "I'll help you, but we have to be careful. Charles is not the man he seems. There's a lot at stake, Lily, for both of us." Lily looked up at Ethan, a mix of fear and curiosity in her eyes. This was it, the moment that would either shatter everything or give her the answers she had been desperately seeking. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to walk away from this. She had come too far, and the truth was calling her. "I'm ready," Lily said. "Let's find out everything." Secrets unveiled. Trust shattered. The following days at the Hawke mansion were filled with a mixture of anticipation and dread for Lily. As she spent more time with Ethan, she found herself grappling with the weight of her past, the past that had been carefully hidden from her. Every conversation seemed to carry a deeper meaning, every glance from Ethan making her wonder just how not much he knew about what had really happened to her, and why Charles Hawke had kept her life a secret for so long. The mansion that had once felt like a symbol of her newfound wealth and opportunity now felt more like a prison. Its walls seemed to close in on her as the days passed. Every room, every hallway, every portrait on the wall felt like a reminder of the life she had been denied and the man who had stolen it from her. It was no longer just a place of luxury. It was a labyrinth of lies, betrayal, and hidden truths that Lily needed to unravel. One afternoon, after a tense meeting with Ethan, Lily found herself wandering the mansion's extensive grounds, lost in her thoughts. She needed answers. She had lived a life filled with uncertainty, but now the pieces of her identity were slowly coming together. The photograph, the name Ray, the connection to the Hawk family, it was all too much to process, and yet it all made sense in a way. Her heart ached with the realization that the family she had been told she didn't belong to was the very family that could have protected her. The wind rustled the trees, and Lily sat down by a fountain, the soft sound of water soothing her frazzled nerves. She had been pretending, living in the illusion of a new life with Ethan's help, but her heart knew the truth. She wasn't just someone who had found a place in a wealthy family. She had been stolen, erased from history, and thrust into a world that was not her own. And now, with each passing moment, she could feel the pull of the past, the unresolved questions that demanded answers. Ray. Lily turned to find Ethan standing a few steps away, his expression unreadable. His presence was both a comfort and a reminder of the uncertainty she faced. She had confided in him, trusted him with her deepest fears, but a part of her still wondered, could she truly trust him, or was he just another person tied to the legacy of the man who had taken her away? Ethan, she said, her voice quieter than she intended. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you tell me what you knew about me? Ethan walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate, as if weighing every word he would say. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, yet firm. I wanted to, but I knew it would change everything. I didn't want to make things harder for you. I thought maybe it would be best if you discovered it in your own time. Lily looked down at her hands, twisting the fabric of her sleeve as the weight of his words settled in her chest. You think this is about time, about what's best for me? She asked, her voice cracking with emotion. Do you even know what I've been through? Do you have any idea what it's like to live without knowing where you come from? To not even know who you are? Ethan stepped closer, his gaze softening with understanding. He knelt down beside her, gently placing a hand on hers. I can't pretend to know what it feels like, but I do know this. I care about you, Lily. And I want to help you find the answers you deserve. Lily's breath caught in her throat, the raw honesty in his words hitting her harder than she expected. She had been so focused on finding the truth about her family, about the lies that had been hidden, that she hadn't considered what this journey might mean for Ethan as well. He had opened his home to her and the twins, and had become a lifeline she never knew she needed. But now, as his hand rested on hers, she felt a flicker of something more than gratitude, something she couldn't quite place. Thank you, she whispered, but I need more than your help. I need to know the truth. I need to know why Charles did this to me. Why he erased me from his life. Ethan nodded, his expression hardening as the thought of Charles Hawke's manipulations resurfaced. I understand, and you will, I promise. Before Lily could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. They both turned to see Charles Hawke approaching them with his typical air of arrogance and cold composure. His sharp gaze flicked between Lily and Ethan, lingering on their clasped hands for just a moment longer than necessary. Is everything all right here? Charles asked, his tone smooth but carrying an undercurrent of something darker. Lily straightened up, withdrawing her hand from Ethan's. The moment was over as quickly as it had begun. She forced a smile, masking the turmoil that bubbled beneath the surface. Yes, she replied, her voice steady. Just needed some fresh air. Charles' gaze narrowed slightly, but he nodded, his eyes flicking over to Ethan. I trust you're both comfortable here, but don't forget your place, Lily. You're still working for us, don't let the luxuries cloud your judgment. Lily's blood ran cold at his words, the veiled threat hanging in the air. For a moment, she wanted to lash out to tell him everything she knew, everything she had discovered about him, but she held her tongue, knowing that doing so would only put her in further danger. Of course, she replied curtly, rising from the bench. I'll return to my duties. Charles' eyes lingered on her for a beat longer, a look of both amusement and control flickering in his gaze before he turned and walked away. As he disappeared around the corner of the estate, Lily felt a surge of anger and determination wash over her. She wouldn't let him control her any longer. She wouldn't let him get away with erasing her past, with manipulating her life for his own gain. I won't back down, Lily muttered to herself, her voice filled with resolve. Ethan watched her with a deep, searching look in his eyes. He understood now that the battle Lily was facing was far from over. It wasn't just about finding the truth, it was about reclaiming her life, her identity, and her future. The next few days were filled with tension. The mansion, once a symbol of luxury, now felt like a battlefield. Lily spent her time carefully observing the staff, trying to learn more about Charles' secrets, trying to find clues that would lead her to the truth. But each day, the walls seemed to close in tighter. The weight of her discoveries felt heavier, and the consequences of what she was about to uncover became more apparent. But Lily was no longer the girl who had been erased from history. She wasn't just someone trying to survive. She was a fighter, a woman determined to reclaim what was rightfully hers. And with Ethan by her side, she would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. The fight for freedom. The days that followed Lily's discovery of the photograph were filled with tension and doubt. With each passing hour, the question of who she truly was became more urgent, and the lingering feeling of being trapped under the weight of secrets only intensified. The Hawk Mansion, which had once felt like a place of comfort and protection, now felt like a gilded cage holding her within its walls. The air was thick with unspoken words, and Lily knew she couldn't stay in the shadows much longer, but even as the mansion pulsed with life around her, she couldn't shake the gnawing sense of dread that gnawed at her every thought. It was one thing to find a photo of her younger self in a stranger's mansion. It was another to realize that everything she had been told about her past might be a lie. Her life, her history, and even her identity were entangled in a web of deception, spun by the one person who should have been protecting her, Charles Hawke. Lily had never felt more torn in her life. Ethan was constantly by her side, offering his support and his heart, yet the truth remained just out of reach, veiled by years of lies and manipulation. He was kind, thoughtful, and undeniably loving, but what if he was involved in the Hawke family's dark dealings in ways she didn't fully understand? Could she trust him fully when his family's legacy was so intertwined with her pain? One evening, as they sat together on the grand terrace of the mansion, Lily turned to Ethan, her mind racing with all the unspoken questions she had yet to voice. "Ethan," she began softly, "how well do you really know your Uncle Charles?" Ethan glanced at her, the warmth in his eyes momentarily flickering. "What do you mean? I've known him my whole life. He's always been protective of the family." Lily paused, searching his face for any sign of dishonesty. Protective or controlling? Ethan seemed taken aback, but his brow furrowed as he leaned forward. "Lily, you know I don't want to pressure you into anything. I'm just trying to understand what's going on too. But if there's one thing I can promise, it's that I will always be here for you. We'll figure this out together." The words hung in the air between them, but they did little to quell the storm of uncertainty inside Lily. She wanted to believe him, she truly did. But the nagging doubt that Charles might be hiding something too dark for her to understand was growing stronger by the day. The following days became a blur of tension. Lily spent hours combing through old records she had been able to find, doing everything she could to piece together the fractured bits of her past. She dug into every small detail about her biological parents and their tragic accident, hoping to uncover any clue that might explain why she had been erased from the family history. But it wasn't until she visited a local historian, an author who had written about the Hawke family's history, that she uncovered something truly earth-shattering. The historian, a quiet older man named Samuel Wright, had worked with the Hawke family on several projects and knew a great deal about their personal history. Lily had asked to meet him under the guise of wanting to learn more about Charleston's old families, but deep down she had a single purpose: to learn the truth about her birth. When she met him in his dimly lit office, surrounded by stacks of dusty books and old files, she asked the question that had been burning in her chest. "Do you know anything about Charles Hawke's brother Andrew or his wife Helena?" she inquired, her voice steady, though her heart raced. Samuel looked up from his papers, his expression guarded. "What do you want to know about them?" Lily took a deep breath. "I was told that they died in a car accident years ago, but something feels off. I think I might be connected to them. Can you tell me anything about their daughter?" The mention of a daughter seemed to make Samuel hesitate. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his gaze flicking to the door as if he were checking for anyone listening. "They had a daughter," he whispered after a long pause. "Her name was Ray. She was 5 when the accident happened. After that, she disappeared. No one ever saw her again. The family did everything they could to cover up the tragedy. Charles took over everything: inheritance, the estate, the businesses, but there's more to the story. I've heard rumors about what happened to Ray, but it's been years, and most people have long since forgotten." Well, Lily's heart skipped a beat as she processed the information. Could this girl, Ray, be her? Was this the connection she had been searching for all along? "Where is she now?" Lily asked almost breathlessly. Samuel hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. Some say she died with her parents in the crash, but others say she was taken somewhere. Hidden, and I don't know the whole story, but I can tell you this, the truth has been buried. Charles doesn't want anyone asking questions. And Lily felt a cold chill run down her spine. Her whole life she had been told she was just an abandoned child. But now, the possibility of her being this missing girl, the rightful heir, was a reality she could not ignore. Determined to uncover the full truth, Lily began to make plans. She knew that Charles Hawke, the man she had once thought of as a distant relative, had to be the key to unlocking the final pieces of her past. Her investigation took a dangerous turn when she finally found the courage to confront Charles directly. One evening, after Ethan had gone out of town on business, she slipped away from the mansion and drove to the Hawke estate alone. Her heart raced with anticipation as she walked up to the grand front doors, the cold air pressing against her skin. When she knocked, Charles himself answered, his face as cold and expressionless as ever. "Lily," he said, his voice like ice. "What brings you here?" She stood tall, her voice unwavering. "I need answers, and I think you have them." Charles raised an eyebrow. "What do you think you know, Lily? You've been digging into things that were never meant to be found. Some things are better left in the past." Lily stepped forward, her eyes locked with his. "No, the past belongs to me. And it's time for the truth to come out." And that Charles' eyes darkened, and Lily could feel the tension rising between them. She had finally reached the moment she had been preparing for, but now, standing before the man who had erased her existence, the weight of everything she had learned seemed almost too much to bear. Charles took a deep breath and spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what you're asking for, Lily. Some truths, once revealed, can't be undone." But Lily didn't flinch. She was no longer afraid of the man who had controlled her fate for so long. "I want to know everything," she said, "and I will do whatever it takes to find it." And this was just the beginning. A new chapter of Lily's journey was about to unfold, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She wasn't backing down, not anymore. The final confrontation. The night air was heavy with tension, as if the very walls of the Hawke estate were holding their breath. Lily stood at the base of the grand staircase, her heart pounding in her chest. For days now, the weight of the truth had gnawed at her. Truth she had uncovered through every photograph, every whispered word, and every secret she had dared to unearth. Now, there was no turning back. Tonight, she would face the man who had spent years hiding her past and manipulating her future. Charles Hawke, the billionaire who had once seemed untouchable, was just behind the large oak doors at the end of the hallway, his world of wealth, power, and lies, still intact at least, for now. But Lily wasn't the frightened, confused girl she had been when she first arrived at the mansion. She had grown stronger with each passing day, determined to unearth her true identity and to confront the man who had stolen it from her. Taking a deep breath, Lily walked forward with purpose. The grand hallway of the mansion, with its towering columns and portraits of the Hawke ancestors, seemed to close in around her, but she didn't falter. Every step she took echoed in the silence of the estate like a drumbeat, a steady rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. The truth was waiting. As she reached the door to Charles's private study, her hand hovered for a moment over the cold brass handle. She could feel the intensity of the moment pressing down on her. This was it. This was the confrontation she had waited for, the moment when everything would change. With a final, steadying breath, Lily pushed the door open. Inside, Charles Hawke stood near his massive mahogany desk, his back to her. His silhouette was framed by the dim light from the fireplace, casting long shadows across the room. The study was exactly as she had imagined, opulent but cold. It smelled of aged leather, cigar smoke, and the weight of years of secrets. Lily could feel the coldness radiating from him despite the warmth of the room. It was the kind of cold that came from power, from manipulation. He turned slowly as the door creaked open, his eyes narrowing when he saw her standing there. His face was a mask of calm, but Lily could see the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had no idea that she had learned the truth. No idea that the game he thought he had been winning was about to end. Well, if it isn't the prodigal niece," Charles said, his voice soothed and controlled. "What brings you here, Lily?" Lily's heart raced, but she stood tall. "I came here for answers," she said, her voice firm, though the words seemed to tremble with the weight of everything she had learned. "I want to know why you erased my existence. Why you kept me hidden. Why you kept the truth from me." Charles chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. "The truth? What truth, Lily? You were a mistake that was never supposed to exist. Lily's stomach twisted. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing the words leave his lips stung like 1,000 needles. You took everything from me, she spat, her fists clenched at her sides. You took my childhood, my family, my name. I am not just some forgotten child. I am your niece. I am Ray Evelyn Hawthorne, and you will not hide from me any longer. Charles's face faltered for a split second, and Lily saw it, his mask slipping. There was a flicker of recognition, of fear behind his eyes. He hadn't expected this confrontation. He had never imagined that the child he thought he had buried would come back to haunt him. But Lily wasn't done. You think you can just erase me, don't you? Lily continued, her voice rising now. You think you can just cover up the accident, the lies, and pretend I never existed. But you're wrong. I am here now, and I will expose everything. The truth about my parents. The truth about what you did. Charles stepped forward, his hands clasped in front of him, his gaze cold and unyielding. You think this is about the truth? He sneered. No one cares about the truth, Lily. People care about power. People care about what they can control. And you have no place in this world. You were never supposed to be part of the Hawthorne legacy. Lily's anger flared, but she held her ground. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide who I am or who my family was. My parents were taken from me, and you were the one who made sure I was forgotten. But I am not going anywhere. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows who I am, and I'll make sure that your empire of lies crumbles. Whilst the tension in the room was suffocating, Charles's face darkened as he stepped closer, his voice low. Dangerous. You think you can take me down? You think anyone will believe a girl who was abandoned? A girl who doesn't even belong here? You are nothing, just a pathetic orphan who got lucky. Lily stood firm, her eyes unwavering. I am not nothing, she said, her voice steady, resolute. I am not some orphan, I am your blood, and I will make sure everyone knows who I am. I will make sure they know what you've done. Charles took another step forward, but Lily didn't back down. She was ready for this. She had been ready for years. She had spent her entire life running from the truth. But no more. She was ready to face it. She was ready to fight for herself, for her parents, and for the family that had been stolen from her. Charles's face twisted into a sneer, but there was a moment of hesitation. Lily could see it now, the fear behind his eyes. He had always been in control, always been the one pulling the strings. But now, Lily had the power. She had the truth, and with the truth came something he couldn't control. You're pathetic, he hissed. No one will believe you. No one will care. Lily reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope she had stolen from the safe, the letter from her mother. The truth. The words her parents had written to her, the letter that had been buried for years. She held it up, her hands trembling only slightly as she spoke. I don't need anyone to believe me, she said, her voice quiet but filled with power. I have proof. I have everything I need to bring you down. Charles' face turned ashen as he saw the letter. His bravado faltered, and Lily could feel the shift in the room. The walls he had so carefully built around himself were starting to crumble. The empire he had constructed on lies was beginning to fall apart. You've lost, Lily whispered, her eyes locking onto his. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. As Charles stood there, speechless, his empire, his carefully guarded world of wealth and power, was beginning to unravel. But Lily wasn't done. Not yet. The truth had just begun to surface, and she would make sure that it came to light, no matter the cost. With the letter in her hand, Lily knew her next move. She would go to the authorities. She would bring the evidence to the press, and she would make sure that the world knew the truth about Charles Hawthorne. But in this moment, she had already won. She had found the strength to confront the man who had stolen everything from her. She had found her voice, and with that voice, she would bring justice to her parents, to herself, and to the future she was finally claiming as her own. The final twist in this story wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about reclaiming her life, her identity, and her future. As Lily turned and walked toward the door, she knew that she had changed everything. Her journey had only just begun, and the road ahead was one she would walk with her head held high. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time for justice. Justice and redemption. Lily stood in the midst of the Hawthorne estate, her heart pounding but steady, as the last vestiges of the night faded away. Her encounter with Charles Hawthorne had changed everything. But it wasn't over. It wasn't just about the confrontation, it was about reclaiming what was rightfully hers. The world that Charles had created, built on secrets, lies, and manipulation, had come crashing down in the blink of an eye. But the journey wasn't complete yet. Now, it was time for the world to know the truth. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the sprawling estate, Lily made her final preparations. The weight of everything she had learned, everything she had fought for, hung heavy on her shoulders. But she wasn't the scared girl who had walked into this mansion weeks ago. She wasn't the girl lost in the confusion of her identity anymore. She was Ray Evelyn Hawthorne. She was the daughter who had been erased, and now it was time for her to be seen. After the confrontation with Charles, Lily had no intention of backing down. She had already taken the first steps to expose the truth. The letter her parents had left her, along with the documents she had gathered, would be the final nail in Charles's coffin. She had reached out to the investigative journalist she had met earlier, and now she was preparing to take everything to the authorities. But first, she had one final task to complete, one final step to ensure that the truth would reach the public. Lily sat in front of her laptop, the screen illuminated in the quiet of her apartment. The documents were already prepared, the letter scanned, the video footage of the Hawthorne estate carefully edited, all ready to be sent. The words from her parents' letter echoed in her mind, a painful yet beautiful reminder of the truth she was now holding in her hands. She knew that this was it, the moment she could no longer hide behind the lies that had shaped her life. She hit It was done. And then she waited. The hours that followed felt like an eternity. Lily could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. The world wasn't going to be the same after this, but she had no other choice. The truth had to be told, and it had to be told now. As she sat there, she thought back to everything she had endured. The hardships, the loneliness, the fear, and realized that the hardest part wasn't the past. The hardest part was facing the future, facing a world that had kept her in the shadows for so long. But in this moment, she wasn't scared anymore. She was ready. The phone call came just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the empty streets. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but Lily didn't hesitate. She knew exactly who it was. Lily! Charles's voice boomed through the speaker, his tone dark and threatening. You've made a grave mistake. You think you can expose me? You think you can just take everything away from me? Lily's breath hitched, but she stood tall, her back straight, as if she could physically push back against his words. It's too late for that, Charles, she said, her voice steady and filled with purpose. The truth is out. Your empire of lies is crumbling. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment Lily thought he had hung up, but then he spoke again, his voice filled with malice. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You think the law will protect you? I have more power than you can ever imagine. You'll regret this. Lily's pulse quickened, but she refused to back down. You took everything from me, Charles. You can't intimidate me anymore. I'm not afraid of you. With that, she ended the call, her hand shaking but determined. She had made her choice, and now she was going to stand by it. No matter what he tried to throw at her, she was ready. The press conference was set for the next morning. It was a small affair, held at a local news station. Lily had arranged it with the help of the journalist who had been following the Hawthorne family for years. She sat at the front, her hands folded in her lap, her heart racing with anticipation. Across from her sat the journalist, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and sharp eyes. This is it, Lily, the journalist said softly, her voice filled with respect. We're going to take down a criminal empire. Lily nodded, but she wasn't nervous. She was ready. She knew that everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for was about to come to light. The cameras flashed as she stood up to speak. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was clear and strong. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. My name is Lily Adams, but that's not the name I was born with. My true name is Ray Evelyn Hawthorne, and I am the daughter of Andrew and Helena Hawthorne. For years, I have been erased from my family's history, hidden away, my existence wiped from the records. But today, that changes. She paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. I'm here to tell you the truth about the Hawthorne family. The lies, the cover-up, and the betrayal that has been hidden for decades. My parents didn't die in a car accident. They were murdered. And Charles Hawthorne, the man who has spent his life building an empire on the backs of others, is the one who made sure I was erased. Lily's voice trembled with emotion as she spoke, but she didn't stop. The world needed to hear this. The world needed to know the truth. As I speak today, the truth is being revealed. Documents, letters, and footage will expose everything. Charles Hawthorne cannot hide any longer. Son, the press room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. But just as Lily finished speaking, a voice called out from the back of the room. What about your mother? We heard she is still alive. Where is she? Lily took a deep breath. She had been preparing for this question, but it still stung. My mother is alive, she said, her voice steady. She has been hidden away for years, kept in a psychiatric facility under the false pretense that she had died. But I found her, and we are finally together again. The room erupted into a frenzy of questions, cameras flashing and reporters shouting for answers. But Lily didn't back down. She stood strong, her heart swelling with pride for herself, for her family, and for the truth that had finally been set free. Within hours, the story went viral. The press was all over the Hawthorne family scandal. Journalists dug into the archives, uncovering years of corruption, deceit, and fraudulent activity. Charles' empire began to crumble, piece by piece. His wealth, his power, his influence, all of it was slowly being stripped away. Legal investigations were launched, and soon enough, Charles found himself at the center of a massive legal battle. And in the midst of it all, Lily stood at the forefront, no longer hiding in the shadows, no longer afraid of the man who had stolen her past. She had found her voice, and she was using it to bring justice to her family. As the months passed, the Hawthorne legacy was dismantled, and Charles was eventually arrested and convicted. His empire of lies was no more, and in its place a new legacy was born. Lily and her mother, Evelyn, relocated to a peaceful town in the countryside, far from the chaos of the city. They started anew, rebuilding their lives with love, strength, and resilience. Lily was finally free, no longer shackled by the past, no longer running from the truth. Together, they opened a community center for at-risk youth, offering them the safety and love that Lily had longed for as a child. It became a sanctuary for those who had been abandoned or forgotten, just like she had been. And every day, as Lily watched the sun rise over the horizon, she whispered to herself, "I'm finally home." The fight for her identity, for her family, and for justice had been long and difficult, but in the end, Lily had won. And as she held her mother's hand, knowing they would never have to face the darkness alone again, she knew one thing for sure: love always triumphs over fear. With the truth finally exposed and justice served, Lily and her mother looked ahead, knowing that the future was theirs to shape. They had a new family now, a family of their own choosing, built on love, respect, and the lessons of the past. And as they walked together into their new life, the sky above them was clear, and the road ahead was filled with endless possibilities.